Today, we'll dive into a mysterious and unknown world, the pre-deluge era. Imagine a distant time where the Earth teemed with life and secrets, a period as fascinating as it was enigmatic. In this video, we'll explore this intriguing period of history where legendary creatures roamed and humanity experienced an era of greatness and decay. What was happening during that time? Before we begin, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to our channel and leave a like if you're enjoying the content. Here, we aim not only to entertain but also to spread the word of the Bible, sharing stories and teachings that inspire and transform lives. In the pre-deluge era, the Earth was a place full of mysteries and wonders beyond our comprehension, a time where the unknown reigned, with legendary creatures that no longer exist and a way of life that challenges our imagination. This period piques the curiosity of many, as it leads us to question what really happened in such ancient times. The Bible, as the primary source and ultimate authority for Christians, is the most important record of pre-diluvian events. In the early chapters of the book of Genesis, we find detailed accounts of this crucial period in human history. In the pre-deluge era, people's lives were marked by a mix of remarkable achievements and a rapidly expanding culture of sin. The achievements of pre-diluvian society included the establishment of urban lands, the development of agriculture and animal husbandry, the discovery and application of metallurgical techniques, as well as advancements in arts and music. However, along with these achievements, a culture of sin was also growing, permeating all aspects of society. Greed, violence, dishonesty, and idolatry became prominent features of pre-diluvian life. The first pre-diluvian family, as recorded in the Bible, is that of Adam and Eve. After being expelled from the Garden of Eden due to their disobedience to God, Adam and Eve began their journey outside paradise, settling down and forming a family. Their firstborn was Cain, whose name means acquired or possessed. Cain is notable for his achievements, especially in the context of pre-diluvian society. He was the first to build a city, which he named Enoch, in honor of his son. This city is the first mentioned in the Bible after the creation narrative. The construction of a city indicates not only social development, but also an organized and established structure in that ancient society. Cain is remembered in the Bible as the first murderer in history, having killed his brother Abel in an act of envy and anger. Despite his achievements and influence in shaping pre-diluvian society, Cain is primarily remembered for his mistakes and sins. His story serves as a warning about the dangers of pride, envy, and unrestrained violence. By highlighting Cain and his family, we are confronted with two sides of human nature and the urgency to choose the path of righteousness and piety instead of selfishness and evil. In the biblical narrative, we find fascinating insights into the intellectual and moral capacity of man in the pre-deluge era. The Bible portrays man as being created in the image and likeness of God, endowed with rationality and moral capacity from the beginning. Although there was intellectual advancement over time, there was no evolutionary process in the biological sense, but rather cultural and technological development. An example of this is Cain, one of the first humans to tread the earth and a pioneer in building the first city mentioned in the Bible, known as Enoch. His leadership and organizational skills contributed to the establishment of a more complex community where knowledge and skills could be shared and developed. The ancient inhabitants of the earth before the flood demonstrated surprising abilities in creating musical instruments. These served not only for entertainment but also played important roles in religious ceremonies, rituals, and the expression of emotions. Among the instruments created were flutes, primitive drums, rudimentary harps, and others. Metallurgy in the pre-deluge era represented a significant advancement in human history. Early inhabitants learned to extract and work metals such as copper and iron. This skill allowed not only for the production of more effective tools for agriculture and construction, but also for the development of weapons and works of art. One of the most significant events of the pre-deluge era was the construction of Noah's Ark. According to the biblical narrative, Noah received instructions from God to build a large vessel that would shelter his family and a selection of animals during the impending flood. The construction of the ark required advanced knowledge of engineering and carpentry, as well as considerable labor and material resources. The ark represented not only an impressive technical feat, but also a symbol of Noah's obedience to divine will and God's provision to preserve life during the imminent judgment. A frequently asked question about the pre-deluge period concerns its duration, that is, how long the pre-deluge world lasted. The truth is that the Bible does not explain how long this period lasted, but many scholars believe that the time elapsed between creation and the flood may have been much longer than the rest of biblical history. Many attempts have been made to date this period, but all without success. In reality, the only set of chronological data available about this period is in the genealogy list presented in Genesis, chapter 5. However, it is unlikely that we can determine specific dates based on this record, as its main purpose is not to provide an accurate timeline. Biblical genealogies are more concerned with establishing family lineages than detailing exact chronologies. Additionally, some of these genealogical lists may be representative rather than comprehensive, meaning they may contain deliberate gaps to highlight individuals of importance in biblical history. The longevity of people in the pre-deluge era allowed for significant accumulation of knowledge over generations. With lives spanning hundreds of years, people had more time to learn, experiment, and transmit skills and wisdom to future generations. This accumulation of knowledge played a fundamental role in the development of society, enabling advances in various areas such as construction and primitive medicine. Furthermore, the longevity of people facilitated the transmission of traditions, stories, and knowledge across generations. The biblical narrative describes the spread of sin from Cain, the first son of Adam and Eve, to other descendants. Cain committed the first murder by killing his brother Abel in an act of envy and wrath. This act marked the beginning of a lineage marked by violence and rebellion against God. Throughout generations, Cain's descendants continued to stray from God's ways, increasing ungodliness and corruption in pre-diluvian society. The narrative highlights that the inclination to sin spread rapidly, leading to a state of widespread depravity that culminated in the need for the flood as an act of divine judgment. Pre-diluvian society, as described in the biblical narrative, was characterized by practices such as polygamy and violence. Lamech, a descendant of Cain, was the first to practice polygamy, taking 2 wives for himself. Moreover, he boasted of his cruelty and violence, as recorded in Genesis 4 verses 23 to 24. These attitudes reflected a culture marked by the pursuit of power and domination. Polygamy and violence contributed to the moral and spiritual deterioration of society, increasing the distance between people and God. In Genesis, chapter 6, the Bible also states that, in the period before the flood, the sons of God mingled with the daughters of men. Some interpreters argue that this meant a mixing between spiritual beings and humans. In other words, fallen angels supposedly had relations with women on earth. But most scholars agree that the interpretation that best fits the biblical text is that this mixing actually referred to the human degeneration promoted by the relationship of godly people with ungodly people, so that ungodliness quickly prevailed and characterized that entire civilization. This means that at that time the godly lineage of Seth was the branch of humanity that preserved the knowledge of God, but over time this lineage mingled with the wicked lineage of Cain. In the biblical narrative, even amidst the growing depravity of pre-diluvian society, there are standout righteous characters who maintained their faith and devotion to God. Abel is remembered as the first martyr, whose sacrifice was accepted by God due to his sincere offering and righteous heart. Enoch is described as someone who walked with God in intimate communion, to the point of being translated to not see death, evidencing his faith and righteousness. Noah, in turn, was a righteous and upright man amid a corrupted generation, being chosen by God to build the ark and preserve life during the flood. These characters exemplify the importance of faithfulness to God and the practice of righteousness in times of apostasy and moral decay. The flood, described in the biblical narrative in Genesis, chapters 6 to 9, represents one of God's most significant judgments on humanity. Faced with the extent of corruption and violence in pre-diluvian society, God determined the end of all flesh through a flood that covered the earth for 40 days and 40 nights. Only Noah, his family, and the animals on the ark were spared from destruction. The narrative highlights God's justice and power in judging sin and preserving those who seek Him sincerely. The flood serves as a reminder of the coming judgment and the importance of obedience and faith in God. When considering the lifestyle of pre-diluvian society, we see parallels with the spiritual challenges faced by humanity today. Just as in that time, society often strays from divine principles, seeking to satisfy its own desires and ignoring God's warnings. The flood narrative serves as a warning about the urgent need for repentance and return to God. Just as Noah preached righteousness and built the ark as a means of salvation, Christians are called to proclaim the gospel and offer hope of salvation amid impending judgment. The flood not only represents a historical event, but also a